Shalom. My name is LizMcGee. I am a Torah teacher, and you are here with the Elect Life Ministry, and I am doing a very large-scale Cliff Note overview for Christians who want to know what really is up with the Old Testament. If you feel like you don't really have a complete grasp, considering, Jesus, Yeshua, was Torah rabbi of that quote-unquote Old Testament. This is a great class for you. I'm going to make quick 5 large points that you might not have heard before. I'm going to delve into large bodies of knowledge, with a lot of information in them, but just pull out a couple of highlights. I'm going to be making a case for Torah. See, because as a Christian, we think as Christians, which is, that's what we've been taught. But technically, more to the truth, Yeshua was a Jewish rabbi. All of his orientation and understanding was from a Jewish perspective, not necessarily Christian, or we would really honestly have to examine what that meant. And there's a movement on the whole earth today, that's what it means, of people going back and looking again at the writings in the house of Judah to find out, did we miss something? So what is Torah? Now, Torah is the word that I use for the Bible, for the Old Testament, because for a very specific reason, which I will show you in a moment. But so in making this case for Torah, which should be a familiar phrase to a lot of Christians, because, you have these books, making a case for Christ, making a case for the New Testament, these things. So we're going to do this again, taking that format. We're going to examine this in a very minute way of what is the Torah, what it contains, what are its rules of transmission? Like, can we trust it? Also, how does it work? And that there is this an allegorical level, but a literal level. So how do these levels or layers of the onion, so to speak, in how does that work? And the last thing is, what are the writings? What is canon? What should or shouldn't I be reading? So these are all things that we're going to delve into and going to give a best broadcast answer in an apologetic way for a lot of these. So when we think Hebraically, and we're talking, the best verse to jump off of this for a Christian perspective is, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was God. Well, it said the Word was with God and the Word was God. That's pretty all-inclusive. So, and it's the Greek word logos. Now, so my opinion is that all of the writers of the New Testament spoke Hebrew. They were Hebrews. They were Jewish. They were reading and studying their writings in Hebrew. And it wasn't until a little bit later, and we talked about that things were coming out in Greek. But originally, I believe it was Hebrew, and it's important because there is a specific transmission record that you can only do with the Hebrew. So one of the reasons we're sort of a little bit, we might possibly be off base a bit, is because we haven't been translating from the Hebrew for quite a long time. So the beginning was the Word. We have to define what is the Word. But we're told here the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and also is God. So this is a presupposition that Christians think we know what the Word is, but this is when I began to discuss it. Oh man, this is way deeper than my brain even knew to think about this whole subject matter. So let's go on here. I want to show you my next slide in thinking Hebraically. Now, when you do talk about, now, and also let me just say this disclaimer, I do consider the New Testament to really be just a continuation of the Old Testament, and it was compiled by some pretty savvy Torah sages who knew what they were talking about and knew what they were doing. So I think that, but they always say that the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. If you don't know the Old Testament, you don't really know what the New Testament is revealing. And as we're going to find out, unfortunately, Christians have sort of been making stuff up for a little too long now, and we need a major course correction. So let's just start it with the word Torah that I like so much. Now you're going to find out, it is what is called an acronym, but I won't even go there. It is made up of 4 letters, but all of Hebrew words really have 3-letter roots to them. Okay. A lot of other notations are for the vowels or other information that's coming through. But here we have 3 letters. And Hebrew, you read right to left. So we're starting with the Tav, that right-hand letter here, the Tav. We're moving, this is a Nun, and this is a Kaf. Okay. Now, that stands for something. It'd be like if I said to you NATO, you really would know. I'm talking about North Atlantic Treaty Organization. A lot of information, but much easier to say NATO. It's much easier to say Tanakh, Torah. Oh gosh, you know what? I have to correct myself right now because there's so much information. Tanakh. I'm using the word Tanakh, which is a word that is used to describe the Old Testament. And it is an acronym, and it does contain these 3 letters, a Kaf, a Nun, and a Tav. Tanakh, as they're pronounced, but they stand for something. So the T there stands for Torah. Now the Torah, so I need to say, is always in its first usage and understanding, it means the 5 books that Moshe is responsible for recording for us, which in the bottom, I'll come back, I'll list them all in a second. But you have the T it stands for Torah, okay? And Torah in this instance, because words do have many levels of meaning, but this meaning of it means referring specifically to the noun, which is the word Torah, which is the 5 books of Moshe. So that's that T. The Nun, or will be like an N sound there, that means prophets, Nevim. The Nevim in Hebrew, that's the word for the prophets, okay? A very important category of the storyline of Israel, including us, okay? And so these prophets are a very special group. You know, the great teachings just on who the prophets were, how you got to be a prophet, why these prophets can be trusted, these different things. But they prophesied in Israel, in the land there, so to speak, for a period of 316 years. The next group you have is the Kaf, the Ketavim. It's a Ket sound, and it is the writings. Now, this is a category that who knew? As a Christian, I just have to keep saying, who knew? Nobody ever told. There's this whole category of the writings. You know, and this alludes to the fact that it's voluminous. If you were really going to write about God, you could and all the books in the world still couldn't contain it all right? There are an amazing amount of Jewish writings. They love the word. They love to write about the word. They love to pray the word. They love to, do festivals, etc. So this is something we're going to find out, that the Jewish mind is a little bit different understanding of what the word is. We know the word as the word made flesh, okay? But as, our great sages would tell us, Yeshua didn't come he came down from heaven. So there's a pre-existence here. And so what are we really dealing with? This is sort of Judas, or let's say the Jews, that's their major. Okay. To us, it's sort of like our minor. We kind of major, so to speak, in this idea of Jesus, of Yeshua, his Messiah. That's great. But they're majoring in doing something on this other thing called the Tanakh and the Torah and these writings. When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, these are totally Jewish writings. Nobody disagrees. These are totally, but they were writings that even the Jews, who are notorious for keeping track of their own writings, lost them. Didn't even know. So this is important to understand. Now, there's a saying, or not, I want to say it's saying, that the Ketav Asherit, this is known, I'm giving you Hebrew transliterated phrases, so you become a little familiar, is known as the Lashon HaKodesh. It is known as the holy language. And all of the language of the sacred text, all of the writings, the translations, was written in this particular font, this particular style, and this particular language, because it had a lot. It was the holy language. It was specifically meant, designed, you learned it to contain, to understand the transmission of the holy language, the holy understanding, the knowledge of God that we have. So this is what is used, and it has a very specific requirement as to its transmission, to its disposal. You know, writing a Torah scroll was not for the faint of heart. It took over a year to just write one scroll. So, excuse me. So the original Hebrew titles for these 5 books are, as I said, the 5 books of Moshe, known as the Torah. It's Bereshit, which means Genesis. The first book, Genesis, means in the beginning, right? Shemot, which is Exodus, which means names. Vayikra, which is Leviticus. It comes out to meaning he called. Bamidbar is Numbers in the wilderness. And Devarim is Deuteronomy, means things or words. Now, those are the 5 books. And this is a whole compilation of Old Testament foundational writings and understandings from Moshe. Doesn't mean there weren't writing things before, or doesn't mean there weren't things after. But this entails the whole episode of Yahweh and Moshe, the 70 elders, and the children of Israel on Mount Sinai when he took them out of Egypt into the wilderness, into the desert, and he taught them a whole new level, how to level up personally, as a nation, and in their total interaction and understanding of God. So let me just move down to the next slide and make some points here. Now, when you think again of this, I'm going to go back to the Torah, these 5 books, right? And this is the foundational core. This is truly what Judah has been studying and why. And I want to take this moment to begin now, as you have an understanding, there's a lot more to Torah than we thought, okay? Well, all right, before I say that, I'm going to say this. In those 5 books, there are 304, 805 individual letters in these 5 books of Moshe. See the guide, see the screen, the picture next to it, and there's a hand, see the Torah scroll there? And see, he had a little instrument. It's called a counter. There is a special job for a scribe to count every letter. And if a Torah scroll that somebody spent a whole year on didn't come up to exactly 304, 805 letters, it didn't make it. It didn't make the cut. And they had a whole system then of disposal. So this is what we're talking about. We are talking about, and there's something in these letters. These letters, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, are known as the DNA of creation. These, and as we understand computer language and computer programming, it shouldn't be that much of a stretch of our minds to understand how, wow, that could be an incredible code. And if you knew, and these letters are also not only that they're arranged in the 5 books, but they are also arranged in 248 columns. It's very systematic. This will explain how Yeshua, because he was like he was a Torah sage. He was the most brilliant, right? Torah sage of his generation, whether you believe he was Mashiach or not. He says that he went into the synagogue at 12 and kind of blew them out of the water. The other priests and scribes talking spiritual matters. But when he went in and preached one day in Nazareth, up in Galilee, and he went into the synagogue and he opened up the scroll, it says, and he started reading right from Isaiah. All right. Now, how did he? And he didn't miss a beat. It doesn't sound like he was fumbling around, or that he just kind of opened it up, picked a page, and no, he knew exactly. See, this when you know how to navigate the 304,000 letters, and you knew how to arrange how it was arranged. There was a way. If you look at that Torah scroll, there are markings and notations on the brown woods on the edge of it that would tell you where you were in the scroll, beginning, middle, end. They had always, these people weren't stupid. They knew how to find stuff. They had a whole system. Okay. So Yeshua did exactly that. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He opened it up and he read the passage and he said, today this is being fulfilled in your presence. And if you really, just to give you a little deeper understanding, he stopped 2 verses short of the completion of the whole concept of what Isaiah was saying, which is fascinating in itself. And there we have a mystery, and we're going to get down to, as Paul says, I have discovered the meaning of a mystery, the secret that's in a mystery, but we'll get there. So what I want to say, you have to really understand that these letters, and they would memorize this. This is what these people do. So I said, a lot of times we have accused, I've heard it myself, I've heard it from well-meaning Christians who will accuse, we're talking about the Jews, in a very kind of arrogant and derogatory, will say, oh, they just worship a book. They're clueless. They don't know what's going on. They're just worshiping this book. They parade this Torah scroll around and they kiss this thing. Like, how weird is that? Okay. Conversely, you have Jews who, and it's in their writings, who will say, Christians are idol worshipers. We're really a bunch of idol worshipers. And I'm like, how does that happen? I'm a Christian. I'm not an idol worshiper. How can they say that about me? We have these insanely different perceptions. All right. Such a satanic ruse. We know, and knowledge is power. We're going to clear it up. We're going to understand we are two sides of the same coin. But Judah is not worshiping this scroll of Torah. Okay. They have been given a very specific charge. They were made what is known as the Sefirot house for the writings. They were given by God a covenant, and in their birthright, they were to keep these books straight, keep them in every generation, keep passing them on, keep them accurate. This was their job. And by and large, hey, where are we going back to find a deeper understanding? We're certainly, well, if you're staying on the path of Yod He Vav He, you're going back to the Old Testament. You're going back to the Hebrew now. All right. Maybe you made your little breeze through Buddhism or, something else and realize still there's no answers. Go back to Torah. Go back to Torah. These letters, you'll find the meat that you have been missing. But there were so many ways in which and there's over 10,000 rules on how to accurately, you have to copy it. Because a good Torah scroll would last about 300 years. I mean, we're not being stupid. We don't have anything that's too, except for the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were sovereignly saved for us by God in the desert, in the dry desert. But by and large, they have a shelf life. Okay. So there is a whole really strict way in which you do that. But there's a lot of other things that are involved in this, and understanding is correct. But I don't want to read this, but Philo, who is a great go-to person on this, he's a contemporary of Yeshua, one of the most brilliant minds of his age, of Yeshua's time, by everybody's acknowledgement. He's a great one. Go and understand how these rules of transmission, he talks about them a lot. He records them. He explains it. And you come away walking like, wow. We're dealing with Mensa mind. Mensa's the genius minds. Okay. So there's things, the doubling of a phrase will indicate something. The change of phraseology indicates something. The synonyms must be carefully studied. Okay. Every word must be explained in all of its meanings, all the different levels and layers, in order that different interpretations may be found. And the number of the word and the numerical symbolism, because every letter is a number. That's a whole huge body of understanding that we will get to. So it's important to understand that we are, again, we're not just talking about that, like the Old Testament, oh, that's the Jews' translation of the Bible. No, they were entrusted by God to keep together these 304, 805 letters, because there is, power in the word, right? And the word that on the level we're talking is the letters. It is the DNA of creation. It is the language that the Father has chosen and communicated in which to plan the future, make creation, or tell us a prophecy, whatever. Now, another thing to understand, and so it was at a time with Moshe, there were always writings. Enoch wrote, when you understand the whole larger storyline, Enoch wrote massively. He was a patriarch in his generation pre-flood, Enochian understanding. The book of Enoch, again, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in the canon, the Ethiopian church, totally read in the New, you could tell Yeshua read it, very common book. This knowledge, Enochian knowledge, was kept. And then afterwards, when they lost the temple and they were scattered, and they didn't have the ability to be in the land and to keep these translations in a central spot, and they were going to go off to the corners of the world. It's much easier, harder to communicate. And so they came up with a system of how to record what they had already and how to make way, again, reiterate the rules for transmission. We would be, well, hopefully we will just grow in wisdom and understanding on this whole subject matter, and we will grow in our appreciation for Judah, because there is a verse. Judah was encouraged right there in their birthright they received from Jacob, and he gave one of the birthright to Judah, and he said, at the end of it all, your brothers will rise up and praise you. Your brothers will acknowledge basically what the great feat that you have done, which is an encouragement, which is really true. I mean, most people, when they get to this level of understanding, going, I can't believe they did it through holocausts and exiles and just, their own, being their own worst enemy, that we have this, and we owe it to, quote unquote, Judah, and to the great humble saints that dedicated their lives to do this. So before his death, Moshe wrote 13 Torah scrolls, all right, of these 5 books, all right. 12 of these were distributed to each of the 12 tribes. Oh, I have a typo there. It's not 21, sorry. I transposed my numbers. Of the 12 tribes. The 13th was placed in the Ark of the Covenant with the tablets, with the showbread, with Aaron's rod that budded, or many things. But so you have and this is talked about in the Torah, but we kind of miss it because you don't really, but the heads of the tribes were given a Torah scroll. And then there was one place in the Ark, and this was all done deliberately so that there would be a checks and balances. So if somebody started rewriting, if some tribe started to get off, and it was very good they did this, okay? But then it says, if anyone would come and attempt to rewrite or falsify the Torah, the one in the Ark would testify against him. So and wouldn't it be exciting? Wouldn't it be absolutely exciting if when we find the Ark of the Covenant, when it is released, when the earth releases it for wherever it's hidden, according to Yah's command, we find again this original Ark, original Torah scroll, and we find out how good Judah's Torah transmission record, that will be what will you probably the Father will use, and we will all see that Judah gets an A. I'll bet you that's how it's going to go out. That's my free prophecy. So likewise, that if he had access to the scroll in the Ark and tried to falsify it, the distributed copies would testify against him. So here, in other words, we have a built-in checks and balances that was instituted right from the very beginning. And I've read a lot in the Dead Sea Scrolls. See, is this, when you do this kind of research, it's sort of like a detective game. You have to just keep there's puzzle pieces all over. But there are writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls that would talk about the test of a true prophet and how the high priest would go into the Ark, into the Holy of Holies, and he would stay there and he would do something. And then he would come out and he would give a rendering on the prophet that came. And I was trying, well, what's he doing? What's he doing? Well, obviously he's going checking the scroll. I mean, so when you get the bigger picture, you can tend to put things together. So what's important now to understand, my last point, because I said that I'm explaining what Torah is, what it contains, the rules of its transmission. And now the last one I want to touch on is what is known as parts. Okay. Now, this is what really, where in my mind, the plane starts to take off. The Jewish mind would, at Sinai, see, this is what they say, and now I absolutely believe this. The level of understanding that the Father gave them was supernatural. When you begin to understand how the Torah works and all the different hidden codes in there and how deep it is, and that it is past finding out, it could only be a supernal book. It can only be a system come down from heaven. So, but parts is what the Jews call, that is the name of biblical exegesis in a Torah academy. Okay. And again, it's an acronym. All right. That's why the P stands for something, the R does, the D does, and the F does, just like I was saying to you, Tanakh. Okay. That's how they make these words. They're acronyms, and it's all memory. It's all helping the mind to remember this stuff. This is all high level mnemonics. All right. So the P stands for Peshat, the R for Remez, the D for Drosh, and the S for Sod. All right. Now, this is also known as the tree of life. So again, leave it to our Torah. Cards actually means garden. It's the tree of life. It is known as the throne room. This is the center of the action. This is where Adam was when he was communicating with the Father in the garden. All right. But what it is, it's a system of how to retain knowledge and how to rightly divide that knowledge. So let's just say all of a sudden you had a little tidbit of knowledge in the Torah, you got a little couple verses and you had no context. Because context is king. How are you going to figure out where to put that, what it means, like in its context? All right. There's a system in place in which they can do this. That's what all Philo's rules are. So that there's no private interpretation. People, this is what, Paul, who was a unbelievable Torah rabbi, who knew this stuff. This was the training he got from his teacher, Hillel, who got it from his teacher. All right. No. I think Paul studied under Gamaliel, who learned his system from Hillel. This is what they're teaching them. This is what they're teaching them. Powers. This is how you study the Bible as a good Torah sage, a good Jewish sage, good Jewish teacher. Okay. We're going to start with, at the bottom is Peshat, the big P, and it stands for the literal level of understanding. Now, this is something I want to also say. If you see, this is such a nice graphic. This is one of our ministry, because this isn't just me. I am the teacher. I am the one who, does the research, but I have a great team of women the Father has given me, and we're making this visually available to people, because I believe a picture tells 1,000 words, that this is the best cheat sheet you can have to study and to try to understand what we're talking about. The Elect Life, it has our logo, but this is basically a great way to encapsulate. So when you join, the Elect Life, if you want to buy the binder, and we just have all these levels and teaching aids and things, it's endless. Okay, so this ministry, I've been researching for 12 years. The ministry's been going for quite a few, 450 YouTube videos, give or take. So there's a lot of body of knowledge, but we've been really putting together a beautiful current understanding of how this ancient knowledge, this is ancient wisdom, this is what Malachi was talking about. We got to go back to what our patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, what were they really doing, saying, instructing us in the context. So back to Peshat, this idea of it's a literal level of understanding for the believer or the unbeliever. It's referred to as the milk of the word. Okay, it's foundational for all Torah study. All right, you have to have a firm grasp of biblical places, timelines, narratives, the moral life story. Okay, the problem today 90% of the population. I mean, we are just one of the most biblically illiterate generations to ever dust the planet. It's really sad. So even to get people to have a right understanding on the literal level is challenging because most people do not have enough Bible understanding. You understand, the nation was founded on people who read their Bible, believed their Bible, trusted it, memorized it, and used it as a springboard to build this great nation. So they were biblically literate. We're the ones who aren't. So anyways, that's what Peshat stands for. Then there's a word known as a remez. And I have a lot of teachings on this, so I'm just doing this quick overview. There's this remez, which has deeper meanings and hints. See, hints that, wow, there's something going on here, something allegorical, there's something mystical, there's a prophetic use to this word. It's where the words, I always say, what happened to me is words just sort of vibrating off the page. And the best example of a remez is where Yeshua, our master teacher, is teaching, and he gives this whole parable about the wheat and the tares that were planted, and how then he tells that's a hint, wheat and tares. See, when something gets like, people aren't really wheat and tares, but in some ways we can identify with, there's a concept there. And Yeshua is doing that, and he says the tares are the wicked, those planted by the wicked one, and the wheat are the sons of God. So right there you have an example of a remez. There's a hint of something, and he gives you the understanding. Right? So that's a whole level. Then you have what's called the drosh. Now the drosh is just huge, and I want to say I am not a drosh teacher. It's about the law. How do we, Torah says, Revelation says, if you love me, you will obey me. There are rules to this thing, okay? It is not a free-for-all. And so this is a huge gift. This is what amazing that Judah has done for the world, having this deep moral, ethical understanding of what God expects and what the Torah is saying, so that each generation can live before him purely, holy, and clean. So the last one, and this is where I love to dwell, is in the Sod. The Sod is an understanding of the more spiritual, the more mystical, the more esoteric, something otherworldly. They're hidden secrets of the Torah, which are there. I mean, the Torah is full of, and when you join this website or join the ministry, and there's the website there, we have all sorts of teaching aids, like I said, these beautifully graphic posters and things to print out. But I also have prints out. So this is a 3-page printout, you can't see, but all the places where all the New Testament, where the words, like the quote unquote, the sealed knowledge, were the keys to the kingdom, where the mysteries of the kingdom, what are they talking about? This is the first remez that I like, what are they talking about? And that's when I started digging and realizing, oh my gosh. Okay, so this will help. I have a lot of what I call scriptural cheat sheets. So you don't have to take my word for it, just start doing your own, just do your cross references. It's in there. All right. Everything can be understood, but we must lay the right foundation, as Paul says, and it's a foundation that's already been laid. So when you move in after this chart, studying it, there's on the other side, or there's another sheet you can print with it, talks about these Peshat, Remez, Drosh, and Sod. There's some interesting information in these notations here. Okay. The Remez, it's a hint, it's veiled, it is for the elites. There's a beginning here where if you kind of, like I said, you're awake today, you understand how the wicked, these terrors, do work among us. They are planted among us. They know a lot of this information in their secret societies, this level of things and they use it to a large extent against us, because the whole plan of the enemy is to keep us stupid, right? Stupid sheep, constantly looking down, not even looking up. If you ever look at sheep, seriously, they never even look up. They're just looking straight ahead, or they're looking down at their next meal. But there's a lot of information that even generations before us had. When I get into explaining the canon and how the books that the evangelical Christian reads today in their 66 book canon, get ready, because it's sort of an inconvenient truth, is the least amount of biblical books that any generation that has access to Torah has read. That's crazy. So you realize you're really running on half a tank, Christian. You don't know that, but that you are. Maybe that's why you feel like you're just running out of gas all the time. Okay. Knowledge is power. If we don't have the right knowledge or level of information, we're not at the top of our game. So then again, the drosh being the moral application for the friends of Yah, this is really what's preached every day in Sunday. This is what a good pastor should be preaching to the people, how to be holy. A good rabbi is going to be telling the people, look, this is what the standard is. All right. And you need to be mindful. If you love me, you will obey me. And the last level is the sod, and I'm going to end here because we're going to come back and I'm going to do more in the extent on explaining the writings and where to find, where is all this mystical, spiritual, esoteric, otherworldly knowledge for the prophet that pertains to the invisible world or invisible reigns. This is defined in Kabbalah in the writings called the Zohar. Okay, this is Jewish mysticism. And I'll start explaining it, Jewish Mysticism 101. But it definitely goes into the stratosphere, no doubt. So I want you to, if you want to take a time with this and go back and read, again, just read the information that's on these slides, because I think it's really important to retain, to review, right? Repetition is the greatest teacher. So in the beginning was the word, these 22 Hebrew letters that Yah used. And they're not just, let me end with this, when we get into the Hebrew, they're not just letters like A or B, they are multidimensional, the way they contain information, all right? It's very exciting. So in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. Shalom, shalom, and we'll see you in the next video.